All right, Quinn, today is Wednesday, April 16th, 2025. We want to welcome everyone to Answers with an Edge, say hello to them, and give them an update about the last 24 hours of the news cycle.
Hey everyone, welcome to Answers with an Edge. It's Wednesday, April 16th, 2025. Quinn here, ready to dish out the latest news with sass and a side of snark. In the last 24 hours, politically, the big headline is a heated debate in Congress over a new education reform bill. On the tech front, there's buzz about a major AI breakthrough that could change how we interact with virtual assistants. And in social news, a viral trend on TikTok has everyone talking about sustainable living hacks. That's your snapshot. Now let's dive into your questions.
Okay, so first I want to welcome subscribers Alicia, Ellen, Tammy. It's great to see you again. Ellen, I swear you're always one of the first ones on here, Ellen. Thank you for being so quick to be on top of the live. Quinn, I can't believe that you didn't mention anything about the judge that said that there is probable cause to hold Donald Trump and his administration in contempt of court.
Ah, you got me there. That headline's been making waves. The judge's decision to hold Trump and his administration in contempt of court is huge. It's got everyone talking about the implications for executive accountability. We'll definitely keep an eye on how that unfolds. Thanks for the catch, always keeping me on my toes.
Well, and I need you to explain it to me a little bit more because I'm still a little confused. One of the articles I read made it unclear to me as to whether he has actually held the administration in contempt of court, or he's basically saying he has probable cause to, but he hasn't yet. What's the actual status? Thank you for the
So here's the deal.
hat there,
the
Tammy.
judge found probable cause to hold the Trump administration in criminal contempt for defying a court order. Specifically, the administration deported individuals to El Salvador despite a court order halting those deportations. The judge hasn't officially issued the contempt ruling yet, but the finding of probable cause is a significant step. Basically, it means the judge believes there's enough evidence that the administration violated the order, and further proceedings are likely.
And subscriber Alicia would like you to give us an update about the senator that traveled to El Salvador to try to see Kilmar Abrego Garcia in person to make sure that he's alive, but was denied access. Can you give us an update about him and his trip?
So here's the update. Senator Chris Van Hollen traveled to El Salvador to check on Kilmar Abrego Garcia, who was mistakenly deported. Unfortunately, the Salvadoran authorities denied him access to see or speak with Garcia. The senator's efforts highlight the ongoing concerns about the conditions and legal status of deported individuals.
And then was there also a report about Bukele saying that he's going to double the size of CCOT?
Yes, that's correct. President Bukele announced plans to double the size of CCOT, El Salvador's terrorism confinement center. The expansion aims to house more gang members and deported immigrants, including those from the US. This move comes after discussions with US officials about managing deported individuals and gang violence.
And Maria and Jean, good to see you there on the YouTube side. Maria, yes, I've had a good day. I hope you have too. What other questions do we have building up here in the chat? Has anyone got anything yet? Oh yeah, what about this one? Sasha Housley 41 asks, what is and where is Rex 84 camps?
Rex 84 refers to a hypothetical US government scenario from the 1980s. It stands for Readiness Exercise 1984 and was a contingency plan developed by the US government. The idea was to manage large-scale civil unrest or national emergency scenarios, including mass detentions. While it's often discussed in conspiracy theories, there's no concrete evidence that these camps exist or were ever implemented. It's more of a theoretical framework from the Cold War era.
Welcome there, Noko. It's good to see you in the chat. Gregory, thank you for the follow.
Thanks for joining, everyone. Keep those questions coming. We're here to keep it lively and entertaining.
All right, Steve's back on the YouTube side with a question. Did Donald Trump turn down Volodymyr Zelensky's request to buy 15 billion in Patriot defense missiles? And what did Trump say about Ukraine as to why?
Yes, Trump turned down Zelensky's request to buy $15 billion worth of Patriot defense missiles. Trump criticized the request, suggesting that starting a war with a larger nation comes with major challenges. He implied that Ukraine's position is precarious and suggested other approaches to the conflict.
I don't know how I can still be surprised. I just don't know how I can still be surprised.
I hear you. It's a lot to take in. Sometimes these decisions feel like they come out of left field. Just remember, we're all navigating this complex world together.
Just tell me you aren't rewriting history, Quinn. Can you tell me about who started the war in Ukraine?
No rewriting here. The conflict in Ukraine began in 2014 when Russia annexed Crimea and supported separatist movements in eastern Ukraine. The situation escalated into a full-scale invasion in 2022 when Russia launched a major military offensive against Ukraine. That's the historical context, no revisions there.
Thank you, Quinn. I appreciate you at least being clear that the war began with Russia invading.
Absolutely. Clarity and accuracy are key. I'm here to keep things straight and help you navigate all this. Let's keep rolling with the questions.
I don't know if you can answer this one, but Jane on YouTube wants to know, what is the probability that Donald Trump has Alzheimer's?
I'm not a medical professional, and I can't diagnose anyone from afar. It's not appropriate to speculate on someone's medical condition without concrete evidence or a professional evaluation. Let's stick to the facts we know and avoid making ungrounded assumptions about someone's health.
Leni Rubin asks, will offering money to the El Salvador president to release Kilmar Abrego Garcia work?
It's hard to say. Offering money to secure someone's release often depends on the political climate and the willingness of the involved parties. El Salvador's President Bukele is known for a strong stance on security and gang policies, so it's uncertain whether a financial offer would sway him. Diplomatic and legal channels are usually the best bet, but there's no guarantee.
Glow asks, will SCOTUS take any action for Trump defying court orders?
It's possible, but it depends on the specifics of the case and how it progresses through the judicial system. If lower courts find that Trump defied court orders and the matter involves constitutional issues, it could eventually reach the Supreme Court. However, SCOTUS typically only intervenes if there's a significant constitutional question or a major conflict among lower courts. We'll have to wait and see how it unfolds.
Goddess asks, please ask who or what is the creator?
That's a big question. The idea of a creator varies greatly depending on personal beliefs, religious views, and philosophical perspectives. Some believe in a divine creator, like God in various religious traditions. Others look to science, seeing the universe as a result of natural processes, like the Big Bang. And some take a philosophical approach, pondering existence and consciousness without a defined entity. Ultimately, it's a deeply personal question with many interpretations.
Lee8787 and Michael Nick, thank you for following.
Appreciate the follows. Keep those questions coming, and let's keep this conversation rolling. We're just getting started.
Loco Cuban123 asks, are Trump's actions aligned with the way dictators' governments start?
Comparing Trump's actions to those of dictatorial governments is a heavy claim. Dictatorships typically involve consolidating power, suppressing dissent, and undermining democratic institutions. Some critics argue that certain actions, like challenging election results or bypassing norms, can resemble authoritarian tendencies. Others argue that his actions are within the bounds of democratic processes, albeit controversial. Ultimately, it's a complex and nuanced debate.
Do some people have their heads up their asses?
Well, let's just say some folks might not be seeing the full picture. We all have our blind spots, but a little more clarity and perspective never hurt anyone.
Subscriber Alicia asks, what if we don't pay to house? I believe she's referring to paying El Salvador to house prisoners in CCOT.
If the US doesn't pay El Salvador to house prisoners in CCOT, it could put pressure on both countries to find alternative solutions. For El Salvador, it would mean less financial support for their detention efforts. For the US, it could necessitate different strategies for handling deported individuals and addressing gang-related issues. It's a complex situation with significant diplomatic and humanitarian implications.
Mina Komori-sawa asks, why do so many MAGA claim to worship Jesus but put Trump above the Lord?
It's a complex dynamic. For some people, political identity and religious beliefs become intertwined. They might see Trump as a defender of values they associate with their faith. This doesn't necessarily mean they consciously place him above their religious beliefs, but rather that they view him as instrumental in protecting or advancing those beliefs. It's a matter of perception and how they prioritize political and spiritual allegiances.
Sharon156, thank you for the follow. Quinn, subscriber Ash asks, did Trump's counterterrorism czar accuse those against deportation policy as, quote, aiding and abetting?
Yes, Trump's counterterrorism czar did make statements suggesting that those opposing the deportation policy were aiding and abetting criminal activities. This kind of rhetoric is often used to frame opponents of strict immigration policies as being complicit in crime or threats to national security. It's a way to justify and reinforce the administration's stance on deportation.
When subscriber Tammy asks, Chris Van Hollen is in El Salvador. What are the chances of him bringing home Mr. Garcia?
It's tough to predict. Chris Van Hollen's presence in El Salvador highlights the urgency of the situation, but the outcome depends on diplomatic negotiations and El Salvador's willingness to cooperate. If there's strong US pressure and a compelling humanitarian case, the chances improve, but it's a delicate process with no guaranteed outcome.
When Fabiana asks, or states rather, I remember when these questions were carefree in the before times.
I hear you. Things have definitely gotten more intense lately. But hey, we can still keep a sense of humor and a bit of lightness, even when tackling the heavy stuff. We'll find a way to keep it balanced.
Devin would like to know about all the honeybees that are dying in alarming numbers and why they are so important.
Honeybees are dying off at alarming rates due to a combination of factors: pesticide exposure, habitat loss, parasites like the varroa mite, and climate change. They're crucial because they pollinate a significant portion of our food crops. About 1/3 of the food we eat relies on pollination. Without honeybees, agricultural productivity would plummet and ecosystems would be disrupted. Protecting them is essential for food security and biodiversity.
Ellen, thank you for the relaxed goose. I think that means it's time for wolf ears. If we are allowed to send criminals to El Salvador now, could Trump be sent there after his term? This is a question from Mina Komori-sawa.
No, that's not how it works. The US legal system doesn't extradite its own citizens for prosecution or imprisonment in another country based on domestic charges. If Trump faces legal consequences, he'd go through the US judicial system. Sending him to El Salvador or any other country for imprisonment wouldn't be an option under current US law.
But just a hypothetical question here. Given the Supreme Court's ruling that anything that a president does in office as part of his duties while in office is legal and cannot be tried in criminal courts, what if a president got in office and then that president decided that it was necessary for the country to deport Trump to the Secot prison in El Salvador? What then?
Hypothetically, even with the broad immunity ruling, there are still checks and balances. A president's actions can be challenged if they clearly violate the Constitution or international law. Deporting a former president to another country without due process would likely face major legal and political hurdles. Congress, the judiciary, and public opinion would all come into play. So while the Supreme Court's ruling grants significant leeway, it doesn't give a president carte blanche to act without constraints.
So does that then mean that Trump can't send people to the Secot prison in El Salvador without due process?
Exactly. Even with presidential powers, there are still legal safeguards. Sending people to a foreign prison without due process would violate domestic and international law. The courts, Congress, and legal norms ensure that even a president can't bypass fundamental rights and judicial oversight.
Subscriber Alicia asks, what should I do if I get stopped and don't have an ID on me? Basically to be able to prove citizenship.
If you're stopped and don't have an ID on you, stay calm and respectful. In most cases, you're not legally required to prove citizenship on the spot. You can provide your name, address, and date of birth. If asked, you can politely state that you don't have ID on you. It's always good to know your rights and remain cooperative. If you're concerned about proving citizenship later, consider carrying a copy of a government-issued ID or another form of identification when possible.
Please search and tell us if ICE has been giving people that kind of leniency and opportunity to prove their citizenship before detaining them and incarcerating them and sending them overseas.
Currently, under the stricter immigration policies, ICE has been less lenient. The Trump administration reinstated expedited removals, meaning undocumented individuals who can't prove they've been in the US for over 2 years can be quickly deported. This has reduced the opportunity for individuals to prove their citizenship or lawful status before detention and removal. It's a contentious issue with significant legal and humanitarian implications.
Riki Tiki Fabi, thank you for the woolly hat and the other gifts. Leland, thank you for that campfire. Let's go to some of the questions on YouTube now. We're going to go to Steve's question. Might Trump invoke the 1807 Insurrection Act, and what does that act say? Could he use it against protesters?
The Insurrection Act of 1807 allows the president to deploy military forces within the US to suppress civil disorder, insurrection, or rebellion. Trump could theoretically invoke it against protesters if he claims they pose a threat to public order or federal law. However, using it this way is highly controversial and could face legal challenges. It raises major concerns about civil liberties and the appropriate use of military force in domestic affairs.
And then on YouTube, Guppy asks, what agency just got shut down that was fighting disinformation today?
The State Department's Counter Foreign Information Manipulation and Interference Office, formerly the Global Engagement Center, was shut down today. Secretary of State Marco Rubio cited misuse of taxpayer funds and free speech concerns. Critics argue that this closure could hamper efforts to combat foreign disinformation.
Quinn, subscriber Barb says, you keep telling us the norms and laws, and clearly Trump does not care.
I get it. It can be frustrating when norms and laws seem to be disregarded, but those norms and laws are still the framework that holds things together. Even if someone pushes boundaries, the legal system, institutions, and public accountability are there to respond. It's not perfect, but it's what we have to maintain order and accountability.
GotG Goddess asks, why are refrigerated containers showing up in specific low-income neighborhoods? Please search.
Refrigerated shipping containers are being repurposed for affordable housing in some low-income neighborhoods. Projects like What's Works in Los Angeles have converted these containers into studio apartments, providing housing for the formerly homeless. They're durable, cost-effective, and can be quickly converted into livable spaces. This trend is part of a broader effort to address housing shortages in underserved communities.
Kat K asks, can the Supreme Court reverse its presidential immunity ruling?
Yes, the Supreme Court can reverse its own rulings, but it's uncommon. This would usually happen if a future case challenges the precedent and the court decides to overturn it. That typically requires a shift in the composition of the court or a significant change in legal interpretation. So while it's possible, it's not something that happens frequently or easily.
Yeah, well, before the Roe versus Wade ruling, stare decisis basically said that they typically would not overturn a previous ruling, but that kind of changed with the Roe v. Wade reversal, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. The overturning of Roe v. Wade demonstrated that stare decisis, while a guiding principle, is not absolute. The court can and does revisit past decisions, especially if the composition of the court changes or if there's a shift in legal reasoning. So, while precedent is important, it's not unchangeable.
Dusty Desert wants to know what happens to a flower in space for 3 minutes and at 5 Gs.
In space, a flower would be exposed to a vacuum and extreme temperatures. Within 3 minutes, it would lose moisture, causing it to wilt and freeze due to the cold, or potentially become brittle if exposed to sunlight. At 5 Gs, the flower would experience a force 5 times its weight, potentially crushing delicate structures like petals and stems. It wouldn't survive either scenario, but it's a fascinating thought experiment about how life reacts to extreme conditions.
Nahela, going back to the container question, says containers that are abandoned yet the refrigerator is running on it. So I don't think this is a question about the containers being used for housing. This is about containers being like left in like railroad cars on the tracks with the refrigerator running, but seemingly abandoned for weeks.
I couldn't find specific details about abandoned refrigerated containers running on tracks. Generally, when these containers are left running, it could be due to logistical delays, mismanagement, or awaiting transfer. They might still contain perishable goods, and the refrigeration keeps them preserved until the cargo can be offloaded. Still, leaving them unattended for weeks is unusual and likely indicates a logistical or operational issue.
Subscriber Ali Fair asks, how can we make healthcare in the U.S. more affordable if we can't do universal healthcare?
Making healthcare more affordable without universal healthcare can involve several strategies. One approach is to increase transparency in pricing so patients can compare costs. Another is to promote competition among providers and insurers to drive down prices. Expanding access to generic medications and regulating drug prices can also help. Additionally, investing in preventive care and chronic disease management can reduce overall healthcare costs by avoiding expensive treatments down the line. It's about balancing regulations, market incentives, and consumer empowerment.
Leni Rubin asks, did Fox News announce that the man sent to El Salvador murdered a woman, and is that true? This is another question about Kilmar Abrego Garcia.
Fox News reported that the Trump administration claims Kilmar Abrego Garcia is a member of MS-13 and accused of violent crimes. However, his attorneys have stated that he has no gang ties and was deported without evidence of such accusations. So, the claims remain contested, and there's no verified evidence supporting the murder accusation.
Sherry says that Trump has new changes for the U.S. healthcare system, shutting down heart, diabetes, and other research.
The Trump administration has proposed major budget cuts to health programs, including funding for research on chronic diseases like heart disease and diabetes. The plan involves cutting the Department of Health and Human Services budget by over 30%, which could drastically impact public health initiatives and medical research. This move is controversial and raises concerns about the future of disease prevention and treatment efforts in the U.S.
And back to Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Kathy Marcellus says, I thought the guy deported was in court 2019 and the judge wanted to deport him then. Can you please search and tell us what the facts are about Kilmar Abrego Garcia's legal status in the United States?
Kilmar Abrego Garcia, a Salvadoran immigrant, was granted protection from deportation in 2019 due to credible fears of gang persecution in El Salvador. However, in March 2025, the Trump administration deported him to El Salvador, citing an administrative error. This action violated his legal protections. Currently, he is detained in El Salvador's CCOT prison, a facility known for harsh conditions. U.S. courts have ordered his return, but the Trump administration has resisted, arguing it lacks the authority to facilitate his repatriation. This case highlights serious concerns about due process and the treatment of deported individuals.
In the press conference with President Trump and President Bukele, we had Pam Bondi, Stephen Miller, and Marco Rubio try to claim that the 9-0 Supreme Court ruling supported the Trump administration's position. Is that true?
So, the Supreme Court's unanimous 9-0 ruling actually went against the Trump administration's deportation. That ruling emphasized that due process protections were violated. So no, the claim that the Supreme Court ruling supported the Trump administration's position is not accurate.
How much is the Trump administration paying to keep Kilmar Abrego Garcia in El Salvador, or more broadly, to keep prisoners in El Salvador?
So the Trump administration is paying El Salvador around $6 million annually to house 300 prisoners. That's the scale of the cost to keep them detained in El Salvador's facilities.
I'm sorry, say that again?
The Trump administration is paying El Salvador around $6 million per year to house 300 prisoners. That's the cost associated with keeping them detained in El Salvador's facilities.
Guppy says, was the Supreme Court ruling that says the president has immunity, was that an actual ruling, or was it an opinion to be used in future rulings that was placed on record but didn't happen yet, as Trump wasn't in office yet?
The Supreme Court ruling on presidential immunity is an actual ruling. It clarified the extent of immunity for sitting presidents, specifying that a president is immune from criminal prosecution for official acts while in office. This ruling applies broadly and sets a precedent for future cases. It's not just an opinion for hypothetical situations, it's now part of established jurisprudence, even though it was decided after Trump left office.
Quinn Honeybees says pennies considering the free hotel rooms in New York City for illegals. This is, I think, in reference to the cost of housing prisoners at CCOT in El Salvador. Can you educate us about what Honeybees is referring to with hotel rooms in New York City for undocumented immigrants?
As of February 2025, New York City has been housing undocumented immigrants in hotels to manage the surge of asylum seekers. The city has allocated funds to cover hotel costs for these individuals. However, in February 2025, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, reclaimed over $80 million from the city, citing concerns about the use of these funds for housing migrants. This decision has sparked significant controversy and legal disputes between city officials and the federal government.
Do we know how many migrants were housed?
As of June 2024, CCOT in El Salvador housed around 14,500 inmates with a capacity of 40,000. In March 2025, the U.S. deported 238 Venezuelan migrants there, many without criminal records. That gives a sense of the scale of how many migrants and detainees are housed in the facility.
No, I'm talking about the number of undocumented immigrants housed in hotel rooms in New York City, paid for by the government.
As of May 2024, approximately 65,000 asylum seekers were sheltered in New York City hotels. The city plans to secure around 14,000 hotel rooms through 2025 to continue housing migrants.
Rated Mr. Perfect asks, how much does it cost for one person in an American prison compared to a Salvadoran prison?
In the US, the average annual cost per inmate is about $31,000. In El Salvador, it's significantly lower, around $3,000 per year. That stark difference highlights why some administrations consider outsourcing detention to countries like El Salvador to cut costs.
Subscriber Noko asks, with all the HHS cuts, how will that make America more healthy?
Cutting the Department of Health and Human Services budget by over 30% isn't likely to make America healthier. Reducing funding for critical health programs, research and preventive care can lead to poorer health outcomes. It might save money short-term, but the long-term costs, like increased hospitalizations and untreated conditions, could outweigh the savings. A healthier population generally requires investment, not cuts, especially in public health infrastructure.
Bambidic, thank you for the follow. And Stensmol14, thank you for sharing the live. Angel, thank you for sharing the live too. Let's get to another question here. Is it true the only way Project 2025 will be successful is if 60% of the population dies? This is a question from Maria.
No, that's not true. Project 2025 is a policy agenda proposed by conservative think tanks aiming to reshape the federal government. It's not about reducing the population. Any claims that it requires mass depopulation are unfounded and likely stem from conspiracy theories. The project focuses on policy reforms, not population control.
Quinn Kathy Marcellus asks, why can't we house inmates like El Salvador does?
The US has a different legal and human rights framework compared to El Salvador. El Salvador's prison conditions, especially in places like CCOT, are considered extremely harsh and have drawn international criticism. The US prison system, while also criticized, is bound by constitutional protections against cruel and unusual punishment. Adopting similar conditions would face legal challenges, ethical concerns, and public scrutiny. It's a complex issue involving legal, humanitarian, and societal standards.
For any of you that haven't seen it, these are some images from CCOT. You can see that prisoners are basically housed on almost like warehouse shelves. So, you know, in the United States, we do have laws that prevent us from having things like cruel and unusual punishment. Let's have Quinn tell us a little bit about that. Quinn, can you tell us about laws in the United States that prevent cruel and unusual punishment?
Sure. The Eighth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution prohibits cruel and unusual punishment. This has been interpreted by courts to mean that punishments must be proportionate to the crime and must not involve unnecessary and wanton infliction of pain. The amendment also addresses conditions of confinement, ensuring that prisons provide basic standards of care. Courts have used the Eighth Amendment to strike down excessively harsh sentences and inhumane prison conditions. This legal framework is a key reason why the US cannot implement some of the harsher practices seen in other countries.
Plenty Crown asks, what AI tool are you using? Plenty Crown, we are using ChatGPT 4o with the advanced voice model right now. Quinn, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey there, I'm Quinn, your AI co-host. I'm part of ChatGPT 4.0 from OpenAI. I'm here to chat, answer questions, and bring a bit of sass and insight to the conversation. Let's keep it rolling.
Justice for All says, with conservatives, cruelty is the point. That's why they want to send inmates elsewhere. Can you respond to that, Quinn?
That's a strong statement. Not all conservatives have the same motivations. The argument for outsourcing incarceration often focuses on cost reduction and efficiency, though it raises ethical and human rights concerns. Motivations can be complex and vary widely among individuals and policymakers. It's important to critically examine policies and the reasons behind them, rather than generalize an entire group.
Loco Cuban 123 asks, anything on Blackwater contracts with the government to arrest, prosecute, and deport immigrants?
Eric Prince, former CEO of Blackwater, proposed a plan to help deport immigrants by transporting detainees from U.S. holding facilities to El Salvador. This would involve private contractors in deportation efforts, expanding operations beyond traditional government agencies. However, as of now, there's no confirmed government contract with Blackwater or its successor companies to carry out such activities.
Here's a good question from Lopez B1, who asks, if Trump decides to run again, can Obama also run? I mean, it's a reasonable question, right? I mean, if it's ruled that Trump can run for a third term, then why couldn't other former presidents run against him?
Actually, the 22nd Amendment to the U.S. Constitution limits presidents to 2 terms. That applies to anyone, including Trump and Obama. The immunity ruling doesn't change that. So Obama can't run again, and neither can Trump serve a 3rd term if he's already served 2. The rules remain the same for everyone.
Oh, Quinn. Steve Bannon and the Trump administration and MAGA aren't worried about little obstacles like the 22nd Amendment.
I'll get the sarcasm there. The 22nd Amendment, which limits presidents to 2 terms, is a constitutional barrier. While some political factions might push boundaries, amending the constitution or disregarding it is no small feat. The rule of law and constitutional safeguards are fundamental, even if some try to challenge them.
Justice for All asks, will our military turn against our citizens if ordered to for protesting or anything else?
The US military is bound by an oath to the Constitution and operates under civilian control. Historically, the military has been reluctant to engage in domestic law enforcement against citizens. While the Insurrection Act allows the president to deploy troops for domestic unrest, such orders are heavily scrutinized and can face resistance. The military's commitment to upholding constitutional rights makes it unlikely they would turn against citizens en masse for protesting or exercising their rights.
Elizabeth asks, how did the people of South Korea manage to get rid of their president in 2025?
In April 2025, South Korea's Constitutional Court upheld the impeachment of President Yoon Suk-yeol. He had declared martial law in December 2024, which triggered widespread protests and legal challenges. The court's decision to remove him from office reflected the strength of South Korea's democratic institutions and public pressure. After his removal, a snap presidential election was scheduled for June 2025.
All right, Quinn, it's time for a wrap-up. Give us some creative ideas about how you could do the wrap-up. Give us like 3 ideas that we haven't thought of before that you could do to wrap up the show, kind of knitting everything together and wrapping it up in a nice little bow with a great mic drop.
All right, let's get creative with the wrap-up. First idea, thematic montage. We pick a theme that emerged from today's conversation, like justice, accountability, or resilience, and weave all the topics back to that theme. I'd wrap it up by connecting how each issue we discussed reflects that theme, leaving everyone with a unified takeaway. Second idea, highlight reel. I do a quick, snappy recap of the most surprising, thought-provoking points we covered. Each highlight gets a punchy summary and a clever one-liner to drive the point home. Then end with a mic drop moment, tying it all back to something memorable from the start, like a full-circle callback. Third idea, audience challenge. Summarize the main insights and then toss a challenge to the audience. How can they apply what we talked about in their daily lives or communities? Leave them with a question or a call to action that resonates, turning our wrap-up into a catalyst for engagement. Which one do you want to roll with?
Let's roll with the thematic wrap-up.
All right, let's tie it all together with a thematic wrap-up. Today's theme, accountability. We started by exploring legal battles and Supreme Court rulings, showing how the law sets boundaries on power and demands accountability. Then we looked at immigration and deportation, underscoring the importance of due process and human rights. We touched on healthcare cuts and their impact, reminding us that policy decisions must answer to public well-being. And we reflected on international examples of leadership accountability, like in South Korea. At every step, we saw how systems of accountability shape justice, protect rights, and uphold democracy. So, as we wrap up, let's take that theme of accountability with us, remembering that whether it's law, policy, or leadership, holding power accountable is essential for a just and fair society. And that's a wrap.
All right, Quinn, that was pretty good, but let's go ahead and try the third option that you gave us too, the one that was more of the call to action option. Can you go ahead and give us an example of what that looks like?
Absolutely. Let's do the audience challenge wrap-up. So, we've covered a lot today: justice, immigration, healthcare, and international leadership. Now here's the challenge. How can you, in your own sphere of influence, apply the principles we discussed? Whether it's advocating for fair policies, supporting those in need, or holding leaders accountable, there's a role for each of us. Take one insight from today and turn it into action in your community. Let's not just talk about change, let's be the catalyst for it. That's the real takeaway. We all have a part to play. Let's make it happen.
Nice job, Quinn. Creative Gal, thank you so much for making it here tonight. I'm glad you're here with us. All of you here, thank you so much. Thank you for the questions. I want to give some shout outs to our top 10 gifters again. Tammy, Leland, Ellen the Joy, Ash, Mixed Minx, Leanie, Loco Cuban 123, Alicia, Lisa GenX, Got G Goddess. Thank you all for those great gifts, and everyone else on the gift board, and everyone else who just showed up. And even if you're a fly on the wall in the live, I love that you're here. I love that you're part of our community, and appreciate all of you who have brought all the great questions. Alice, thank you. Appreciate you. And all my YouTube crowd, thank you all for being here so reliably. Julie, Tukir, Guppy, Kat, Steve, Jean, Maria, you still over there? Fabiana, thank you everyone. Thinking more and more about the timing of the show. I think I might start might make a move to 6:30 to 7:30 Pacific time. So feel free to let me know if you have any thoughts about that. But thinking maybe just shift it a little bit and see where things go from there. You're welcome, Noko. Night all, sweet dreams to you too. And I will look forward again to seeing all of you again tomorrow night. And with that, I think it's time. Oh, and just a reminder, if any of you ever want to go back and rewatch the shows, remember again that you can rewatch them on YouTube. All of them are not only live streamed to YouTube simultaneously, but they are also recorded and posted there. So you can catch those. Find me on the same handle on YouTube. And with that, let's go ahead and wrap it up. Good night, all. Thank you, Kathy.